So we agreed, Yossi, that we would be able to interrupt one another during this conversation. Are we still in agreement?
Yes, Dave, that's wonderful. I'd like to make it interactive and conversational. So yes, that would be helpful if I go off on a tangent if you interrupt me.
Yeah, and please do the same with me as well. You do a lot of coaching and leadership development, but we have very, very different backgrounds. But let me ask you this. Why do you do what you do?
Oh my God, you're giving me enough rope to hang myself. Basically, it's my life's calling. When I look back at my life, starting sort of my foray into leadership in the Israeli military and having the fastest promotion record in the history of my regiment, excelling, getting all these awards, but the military does a great job of giving us a sense of shared destiny. We are in this together. And that became kind of a guiding light force direction in my life. And then building a couple of companies and then having my spiritual awakening and emergency, and then being pushed out of that company, which was super traumatic. That awakening experience and that trauma, if I may call it, losing the company I started and grew and took public, was a great blessing in disguise because it changed the direction of my life and got me interested in how spirituality and leadership come together. All those things kind of come together in the work I do now in helping people, other founders and CEOs that are facing the same kinds of pressures that I do. And, everything that I've gone through, including the most painful experience, including this trauma of being pushed out of my company by my board, now makes me that much more effective in being able to relate, to empathize, to support my client, inspiring peak performance in themselves and everybody around them. So it's very fulfilling to see that and see the impact that that has.
Prior to you being pushed out of that company, which was traumatic, my guess is you experienced other traumatic things along the way, correct? It wasn't like the first time you experienced something that felt like a setback.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Going into the military was its own minor trauma. I was a shy, introverted kid, a math and science nerd who was actually anti-Zionist, anti-Jewish state, which was not particularly popular viewpoint when I was growing in Israel, up in Israel. I since then have changed very much, and I don't want to go into the politics of that region, but my point is that getting thrown into that was actually pretty difficult. And then certainly starting my company was quite painful, a process and experience. Before that, I was actually working in a venture capital firm that brought me in to see if I would come up with an idea that they would fund or I would become a venture capitalist. And when I came up with the idea for Individual Inc. was the name of my company, which was the first company to do personal newspapers before the internet. The product, which was individualized, personalized news, mass customized to each individual. This was kind of the pioneering idea of interactive personalized media, which is now all over the place. But this is in the late 80s. And my partners thought it was a crazy idea in the venture capital firm, and they didn't want to fund it. I kept getting rejection after rejection after rejection. I probably had 50 to 100 venture capitalists reject this idea. And there was a point in which it was just painful to get out of bed in the morning and face another rejection. I don't know. I was probably somewhat depressed, but I persisted. And my ex-wife now, God bless her, was super supportive. And we put all our savings and just like, I'm going to sell my clarinet to so which I've had since childhood to so I can support you in doing this. And so that was a super challenge to just persist and believe in this idea and then raise the minimal amount of money that I could from my family and friends. And eventually I found one angel that gave me 50,000 and I built a founding team of people that were willing to work for nothing because I got them to buy into the vision. And but that was a super challenging period of time. All those experiences are tremendous growth opportunities that deepen my experience, deepen my trust in myself and in life.
Before we started recording, you were talking about IQ versus EQ versus, SI, which is spiritual intelligence. And it's probably something that I would have never had a conversation about even 5 years ago, but I'm starting to get it. How much do you think people are relying on their IQ or EQ versus their SI? Where are people going wrong? Where are they going right?
I think we all need all three. The interesting thing is that with our IQ, we have landed on the moon. As humanity, we've split the atom, we deciphered the genome, and now we've got built AI that supplements and exceeds our cognitive intelligence in many ways, particularly mine. I don't know about yours, maybe, but AI can do amazing things cognitively that I am not capable of. So, and an emotional intelligence is super important. So we know what we're feeling and we know what people we're interacting with are feeling. Ability to tune into other people's emotions and respond appropriately is super important. What is spiritual intelligence? By analogy, is the ability to draw on and embody spiritual resources and qualities in daily life. The classical things that have been celebrated as virtues for thousands of years through all the world's spiritual traditions. So that's purpose and service and gratitude and trust and joy and compassion and forgiveness and presence and humility and integrity, etc. These are universal values that across all the world's spiritual traditions have been highlighted as those that lead to fulfilling and good human life and supporting both individual fulfillment and well-being and pro-social as well. Even before anybody hears the term spiritual intelligence, we have these qualities at some measure. People have their sense of purpose. Some people feel called to serve. We practice gratitude. We bring in joy. Our hearts have a natural capacity for compassion, for suffering in ourselves and others. The point is people naturally have some measure of spiritual intelligence. What my research and other research is now highlighting is that these qualities, when we cultivate them and deepen them and result in more fulfilling life and more powerful and inspired leadership. So now we can more consciously cultivate those qualities if we become conscious that and then intentional and say, just like I want to be in good health, I'm going to go to the gym or I'm going to exercise, I'm going to go surfing, I'm going to go jogging, I'm going to hike in nature, however way we do it. But we set an intention and we have a set of practices that keep us in shape. We don't just read a book about health and we're done. It's an ongoing process. So same thing with spiritual intelligence.
I wonder, in your experience, if at times we're talking about these things in a shallow way, where it's, yeah, no, I know, trust and forgiveness. I get it. Yeah, of course. And we intellectualize the things that we think we know. But I'm curious to get your perspective on that. Are they this stuff, or do they just know this stuff?
No, I think that's the crucial question. And that's why I said spiritual intelligence is the ability to draw on these resources and embody them in daily life. So, yeah, I might say, yeah, I know it's good to not have my ego all in a team meeting at work, and try and do the right thing rather than trying to prove myself right. We might all understand that because we've been in meetings where egos get involved and everybody's trying to prove themselves right and put other people down. And so we can feel it. But, invariably, most of us, we still have our egos and it gets hooked,
Yeah.
etc. So it's a lifelong journey to embody these qualities more fully. Yeah. And so this is the crux of the issue is not understanding that forgiveness and compassion are good and humility is good and integrity is good. Yeah. And so for thousands of years, these traditions have been saying that. And now for the last 30 years, the field of positive psychology, they got started with people like Marty Seligman, and they developed the character strengths inventory and values in action. And they have 24 qualities. And in my model of spiritual intelligence, there are 22 qualities, and over half of them map directly to the positive psychology quality. So we understand that hope is good and trust is good and gratitude is good. And how many of us are really embodying that in daily life? Maybe I do that with my children. Maybe I do that with my partner. Maybe I do that when I go to whatever, my spiritual community, my church. But do I do it at work? Do I do it in business? Do I do it when I'm driving on the freeway? And so it's like, yeah, I understand that being kind is good, and I understand that being compassionate is good, and I understand all of that. Yeah. But okay, how am I living those values? How am I embodying them? That's the crux of the issue, and that is what spiritual intelligence is the ability to embody these things, not to understand them intellectually. And I am on this, I'm not done with my spiritual intelligence. I think it's a lifelong journey. I don't know anybody who is perfect. I mean, maybe some dead people are
Yeah,
like.
maybe a couple. When you meet somebody now, do you feel a much greater connection than maybe you did as a younger person?
Yeah, I feel a lot more connected because it can sense into our shared humanity, and I treat them more as subjects rather than objects. So, Martin Buber has this idea of he wrote this book, I Thou, and a lot of us are like in this transactional,
Hmm.
very capitalistic culture that's very individualistic. It's like our mindset is very egoic, narcissistic. What can I get out of this interaction
Hmm.
or this person? So it
Right.
becomes very transactional. But when I start treating other people, and there I bring in some of my Jewish roots, like seeing others as made in the image and likeness of the divine, and looking for and seeing their divine spark, then I naturally have a sense of respect for them. So that can show up when I'm in a restaurant and there's a waiter that is serving me, and do I take them for granted, and do I
Hmm.
whatever, do I actually appreciate them and make a momentary connection with them? It becomes a more fulfilling, richer experience for me as well as for them. And
Right.
so they're not just an object. Okay, how quickly are they checking my stuff out?
Right.
Uh, and I'm done. I never connected to them. I never made eye contact. Because one of the issues we're facing right now has been named. We're facing a loneliness epidemic, and that's why we have skyrocketing anxiety, depression, substance abuse, addiction, suicide rates, and the biggest culprit is loneliness. All the research, the longest running research that started in Harvard over 80 years ago shows that our health is so tied to the quality of our human connection, friendships, intimate relationships. It's as or more important than whether we smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day.
Right.
And so finding a way to connect with others is so crucial for our well-being individually and as a society.
Of the 22 qualities that you have identified in your book, where would you say which of those qualities do people neglect the most or forget the most?
Well, I don't know about forget, but I think the hardest to implement is egolessness. I think that that's hard. Presence is super challenging these days. I mean, we're so bombarded with so many things competing for our attention: social media, text messages, Slack messages, emails, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're all very challenged to be present with those we're interacting with, whether it's at a work meeting and we have our phones, we're kind of constantly multitasking,
Yep.
or we go on a date with our partner, spouse, and we're on our phone and we're thinking about yesterday or tomorrow, and we're not really present with that person, and the quality of interaction really suffers. So managing our attention and staying on target with our intention, I think, is super challenging for most of us.
So
And
what's the answer? Like if you talk to some young people, and I consider us young, by the way, we're young. But if you talk to
Maybe
some,
you are, but okay, I'll take the
now we're
compliment.
young. We're in our early 20s, both you and I.
Okay.
But if somebody in our age bracket decides to make a comment about phones, social media, whatever, the immediate response is, "Oh, boomer, baby boomer, stuck in the old days," just like we used to do with our parents. But the reality is I wonder if those, and it's not just a young person problem; it's an all people problem. The whole phones thing or the social
Yeah.
media thing is if people are truly aware of how that's chipping away at their presence and at their ability to connect with somebody else. Do you think
Yeah.
there's even an
So
awareness of that?
yeah, but again, just to be clear, I'm not saying stop using your phone or stop using social media. I use those things.
Sure.
I'm just saying we have to be intentional. We have to do other things to compensate for those challenges. So maybe having a meditation practice where I learn to direct my attention and stay focused so that I don't become an ADHD in sort of my awareness, and it's very tangential, and I'm kind of always jumping from this, that, and the other. So, it's not that we need to do away with all those technologies and tools. Like anything, we can use it for the good or we can use it, in detrimental ways. It's just intelligently knowing its place and then um, knowing what the downsides of using it in certain ways that becomes problematic, and then how to compensate for it so that we don't hurt ourselves and those that we love.
I was reminded of the phrase paradox of choice earlier today. I was listening to a podcast and it kind of reminds me of what you were saying. And I wonder how much of that is at play with all of the options available to us online. And the episode I listened to was really geared toward younger people and when they get out of school and they're off on their own for the first time and they enter into a structureless world with unlimited choices, friends, jobs, to the point where it's almost it's very difficult to choose which path. Is there a right path? Is there no path? They're overwhelmed by the choice.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, there's been research also of people that came from, deprived economies or whatever, or in Russia, communist Russia, and they come to the US and they like come into the supermarket and there are like so many different brands of peanut butter or crackers. And like, oh my God, how do I make a choice? And you can kind of freeze and get overwhelmed. I don't think we want to go back to no choice or limited choices. I think we want to become more attuned to ourselves so we can be wise in making choices. And actually, this relates directly to spiritual intelligence and emotional intelligence so that we could follow our inner compass and become more inner directed and become more attuned to ourselves so we can discern. Okay, I have all these job opportunities, and coming out of college, I could go traveling for a year. I can go to Southeast Asia, or I could go take a job in investment banking or in consulting, or I can go work for a nonprofit. Awesome. So you have all these choices. More power to you. Now, are you in touch with yourself? Are you clear about your values so that you can make the best choice for yourself? And that's where spiritual intelligence and emotional intelligence come in, is to be attuned and learning how to discern and follow our intuition and our inner guidance, as
Mm.
opposed to just relying on social pressure or whatever. We're not inner directed, we're outer directed, and we're driven by how many likes we get on our Instagram and whatever, and that's source of meaning and purpose to our lives, which if it's fulfilling to you, all the more power to you. But I think most people find that after a while, that is not so fulfilling.
Sometimes I wonder about why depression and anxiety and suicide rates and all that are exponentially higher when we have access to more intelligence, more information, more people like you telling these stories. There's books available, podcasts available, YouTube channels available to help us all evolve. And then on top of that, there's so many other resources. but it just seems like we're not making progress, even though the information is there. I wouldn't have known somebody like you existed 30 years ago. I wouldn't have even thought about it, right? But now there's more people like you and I that coach and develop people in different ways. And there are more people to listen to, but yet our mental health just is, I can't quite figure it out. I am interested, though, in getting your perspective because we talked about this, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the difference between spirituality and religion. What do you have to say about that?
Well, it's an important distinction, and just to be clear, people can develop their spiritual intelligence regardless of where they sit on that spectrum of religious, spiritual, but not religious. I've worked with over 100 CEOs, and they've been across the spectrum from the devout religious practitioner to the spiritual not religious to the agnostic to the devout atheist, if I can use that term. But I still haven't answered your question. How does spirituality and religion relate to each other? So spirituality, I think, generally is understood to have to do with the search and connection to the deeper layers of meaning in life. And that's basically, for the most part, an individual experience that one has, or a search or a path. And there are many paths, whether it's Buddhism or Hinduism or Christianity or Islam or modern paths like that are not tried to whatever. Now, so that's spirituality, which is more of an individual path and an experience and a search. What is religion is then taking those spiritual experiences and codifying them within a belief system, or you can call it a dogma or whatever, and then having institutions and organizations where people come together to practice that. It has to do with shared belief systems and the practice of those belief system and spiritual search or development in the context of an organization.
Would you say that in your experience, the organizations you support and the CEOs that you support live those values or the belief systems that their organizations have or project?
To greater or lesser extent, just like the all of us,
Yeah,
to what extent are we in integrity with what our values? Are we walking the talk?
yeah.
And yeah, that's the challenge. That's the challenge. I mean, it's easy to have a corporate mission and value statement that says, "Oh, we value diversity, or we value meritocracy, or we value, psychological safety." But are we as leaders, are we as participants really walking that talk? And if we just put those nice value systems in a corporate brochure, or put a poster in the conference room that say these are our values, and then, which is great to do, but if we do that and then and that is not lived, that actually backfires and breeds cynicism, and then it becomes not only not helpful, but becomes detrimental. But it's a challenge for all of us because we know we want to practice openness and curiosity. But when our ego gets hooked and we are in a debate, we become less curious about the other person's thing, and we're not listening very well. We're interested in proving ourselves right, and we're not listening to what the other person says. We're thinking about how we're going to rebuttal them. If I fall into that trap time and time again.
Is
Uh,
isn't it possible though to debate and disagree and challenge and still feel full connection at the same time?
Yeah, I've done that on some very charged topics relating to politics, relating to the
Yeah,
Middle East, with
yeah.
friends, with family. So yeah, but you have to have a discipline, and like and it's super important in intimate relationships. Part of my passion these days is spiritual intelligence, not only in the domain of leadership, but in the domain of relationships, romantic relationships, and I work with couples, and the key part of it is practicing that very thing where how can we have a disagreement, and then I can make sure I understand your point of view, and like we do reflective listening. Okay, well, I'm hearing you, this is what I heard you say. Did I distort anything? Did I miss anything? Is there something else you want to add?
Right.
Until when you feel completely heard and understood, then I can respond and say, okay, well, I heard all this, this, and this, but here's how I look at it, and this is why I disagree with this point and that point and this point. And then can you then reflect back to me what I'm saying?
Mm,
And then I feel heard. And then as once we understand each other, then we could look for, is there a synthesis that we both feel a win-win through? So yeah, that is possible.
you talk about spiritual connection. I feel more connected to somebody that will hang in there and debate because they're seeking an understanding, not trying to win, and they're not trying
Mhm.
to like prove a point. It's just they're almost in a fight for understanding, and that to me always feels good. And there's only certain people you can do that with.
But just on that point, if I may interrupt you,
Yeah,
that is the Socratic method, where the debate is not exactly for winning, but it is for in the sake of truth. You know, in the Jewish tradition, they talk about disagreement for the sake of heaven. So, you know, and the Talmudic thing is like a lot about arguing between the rabbis, but it's all about trying to get to a deeper understanding. But it's through that back and forth, there's a deeper understanding. So yes,
right.
I'm totally with you. But not everybody is capable of doing that because you have to be able to sustain a certain level of what appears like conflict or disagreement. And
Hmm.
a lot of people don't like disagreement. Now, for you and for me, it's actually a way of connecting because
Right.
I feel your truth, you're hearing my truth. Otherwise, if I'm just placating you, it's whatever connection is there is not real.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Like, if we're having a conversation and you're just going along to get along and complimenting me and telling me what you think I want to hear, I'm checking out. And I'd say that I don't get, there's nothing here for me, man. It feels like I'm separating. Whereas if you said, wait a minute, let me ask you a question, that to me feels great. It feels like we're connected. Um, but I was wondering also just your perspective on, and I've got another guy I podcasted with a few years ago. We had this really cool conversation about systems and structures. And although we all need them, like if we're going to play a game of some sort, there are boundaries to the game we're going to play, baseball or, a board game. There's rules and, regulations so that we don't get off path. And I think in life, we've got a lot of those boundaries and structures like religion or politics or, our legal system, for example. All of those things, the intentions of all of those things are good, I want to believe. But at the same time, those very structures, we identify with those things. And eventually, if we're not careful, we lose that connection that you're talking about because we're defaulting to the boundary of the system or the structure. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's a critical point about so structure, discipline can support us. Like for example, I have you might say a structured routine to my morning of certain meditation, exercise, physical exercise, whatever, rituals, whatever I do that supports me. But you know, I can't be too rigid with it. Then there's no freedom in it. And if I'm in a relationship with someone, whatever, or something happens, I need to be flexible and flow around it. The structure is good, but it can become overly rigid. And when it becomes overly rigid, it limits our freedom, it limits our spontaneity, it limits our play. And so, but as you point out, we need a certain structure to play, to
Hmm.
create safety. It's a yes and it's not either or. Structure is good or structure is bad.
Right.
Structure is good to a point, but if it becomes rigid, then it's limiting.
I heard somebody say recently that, like, say, a healthy tree is flexible, a sick tree is rigid.
But the tree, it has structure and fluidity, you know, so
Right.
it has it has the trunk and it has the whatever, and within it there's the sap and the fluids, and it has a root system that's keeping it rooted, so it's not losing its ground. It's
Correct.
not, and then that enables the top to sway and not break. So in our human bodies, just for a moment, we have bones that are more rigid and give us structure.
Yep.
And then we have blood and fluids, etc., that is flowing. And I think, so we need all those elements. We can think about it metaphorically. We need the fluidity and the dynamism, etc., and we need the structure. And
Yeah.
it's so I think the best people and the best organizations have policies. I mean, if we take it to that, you need policies, and for the most part, you want to be adhering to your policies as an organization, as a company, as whatever. But so once in a while, you need to make exceptions. But that requires judgment and discernment. And if you're like, okay, well, I'm so spontaneous, policies are too limiting and whatever, then you get chaos, thinking that that's freedom. But that's more compulsion, which is not true freedom. I mean, I've worked with clients in therapy, and like, they're like, okay, well, I've worked hard today and I'm just gonna binge watch on Netflix and whatever. And like, they don't have a sleep discipline. They stay up too late and then they're waking up in the morning and then they're not feeling well. But is it serving them? I mean, is that real freedom, or is that just hedonistic impulses that doesn't serve them? And so it could be interpersonal, the impact I have on others,
Yeah.
and then what is the impact of just doing whatever the heck I feel like in the moment has on me.
Do you feel in your experience that people are in need of more boundaries or in need of letting go of some boundaries?
Yes.
Yes, meaning,
Yes, meaning both.
yeah,
And I think yes, meaning different people in different proportion, but I think yes, also for each of us individually. I know for me, there's some boundaries I need to let go of
yeah.
and be less rigid, and then there's some things I need to be more disciplined about. So even within oneself, I can't say that I need to let go of some things and I need new things to take place in them. And I think that's true for most people. I can't say that I only need more or less of one.
So how do we help people feel more connected to other people?
Well, I think one of the things I would say is showing curiosity about other people and being open to learning about them. And then secondly, being vulnerable and in sharing um, of ourselves, which takes courage and willingness and so on.
Hmm.
And obviously, being intentional, like this is important, like, giving a sense to the other person that you are important. And I respect you, you are important. And of course, there'd be how important my kids are. They have a whole different level of importance than my spouse and my partner versus, the cashier and in the checkout line. But for however long I have 2, 3 minutes in the checkout line with the cashier, I'd like to connect with them and give them a sense that I'm not taking them for granted. And I think that feels like a human connection within the limits of
Right,
that interaction.
right.
So
But you feel it. It's a genuine thing. They're a human being, right? And you're not doing it to check a box and say, "Hey, look, I see those posts on LinkedIn all the time that I treat the janitor just the same way that I treat the CEO." It's like, "Oh, big deal." Well, you should. You know what I mean? That nobody's going to get credit for that. But I do agree with you. It's probably you go through the line, and this is a person who's doing their job, and they're a human being interacting with you. So as a courtesy, why not? Why not feel that connection? I would love to see more of that. Somebody said to me the other day, I was talking to somebody at a cookout, or I forget where I was, and somebody else I know came up to me and said, "Hey, so and so wants to talk to you over here. And I said, okay, no problem. I excused myself and I went over. And then this person said, oh, I knew you wanted to be saved. I pulled you out of
Mhm.
there. I'm like, well, no, I didn't. I was totally content talking to the other person, but in their mind, I needed to be saved from that personality. And I'm thinking to myself, that person probably needed to be saved from me. But but at the end of the day, for me, it's interesting. I look at it and say, how can I find a way to understand you? I don't know who you are. We met one time over Zoom, and we come from very different backgrounds. You're a Harvard, MIT, Stanford guy. I went to Stonehill. We have no educational commonality. We're raised in different cultures, but I always am looking at it from the perspective of how can I somehow try to understand this person? Do we have an ability to relate at some level? And I don't have many examples of where I didn't feel that that was happening. And I'd love to see more of it, quite frankly. And that's probably the work you're doing is just, you do realize that we're more similar than different, right?
Yeah, so let me ask you if I can put you on the spot. So, okay, so different culture, different educational background. I feel connected to you in this moment and from our previous, I feel we both care about helping leaders lead from a more inspired, purposeful place, bringing out the best in them and others, and creating more humane organizations, environments that bring out the best in people. And we share, my sense is we share in that purpose aspiration. We both seek depth. As I said, I see behind you the sign dad. I get that being a father is important to you, being a father is important to me. So if we spend more time, I just feel that connected to you. I feel some resonance. But you tell me. I mean, I don't.
I do too. I do too. It's hard for me not to. If both people are curious and both people respect the humanity in the other person, there are times like it's not like I grew up with a lot of perspective. I really didn't. I didn't leave my town until I was in my 20s. So I only knew a very small place. And, when you grow up in a small place and you're around the same people, you start to believe the same things until you leave. And then
Mhm.
you leave and and then when you encounter different people with different experiences, sometimes you have to test your beliefs against what you're actually seeing. And I've spent my entire adult life realizing that everybody I meet is like good. I mean, I get it. There are some people out there that make
Well,
questionable
in
decisions.
their essence, at least they're good. And
Yeah,
to the extent they're acting like a jerk, it's because of their own woundedness or
correct.
because of their own things. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we naturally start to see that, the goodness in others.
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, I think about, all the issues that, exist on a global level between countries or that exist at a political level, domestically or internationally, religion, all of these things. And every time I meet somebody who comes from a different place, from a different background, I can't not see the similarities. I just, it's just that everybody, I feel like we all come from the same, we're all cut from the same cloth at some level. And so like that's how it's always been. And when I hear or experience rigidity in another personality, I almost feel sorry for them because they don't know how ignorant they are. They
Yeah.
actually believe what they believe. They believe it as a fact.
Yeah, no, those are challenging, and partly also then it's hard to feel seen by them because they have such a defined lens and that they're looking at everything, and if I don't fit into it, then I don't. But to me, that calls on my own capacity to rise up. How can I find like compassion, not sorry from them from I am better than them, but like okay, what are the parts in me that can be rigid? As some wise Roman thousands of years ago said, I think it was Cicero said, nothing human is alien to me. So I have rigidity within me. And then I could see the rigidity in others and I say, oh, I see your rigidity. I know that's hard. I know there's parts of me that are also rigid. So
you make a great point, and I'm doing my interrupting right here. I posted
Sure.
something today on LinkedIn, and it reminds me of what we're talking about. And it reminds me of a time in my life where you couldn't have put me anywhere. And I used to have the example I gave on LinkedIn was when we were young children, our parents always extracted us from any environment where there was alcohol. So if there was alcohol present, we had to leave. And that was it. And there was like no questions asked, and it was always associated with bad things happen when booze is around. But I didn't comprehend it. I just knew we always had to leave. And so when I went into middle school and all of a sudden certain friends started drinking, I started to pull back. And then in high school, when it became a norm, I pulled back even further because I didn't know how to adapt. And so when I was in those situations, I lost my personality. I didn't know how to acclimate. So I either withdrew or I kind of stood there with my arms folded, not wanting to be there. So my point is there was a rigidity because of my ignorance. I didn't know how to cope, adapt, acclimate until I finally did. And it took me years. And this is not an endorsement for going out and drinking or anything like that. It was just learning to accept the fact that this is a normal part of life for many, 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 many people, and that it's not always bad. And so, but until I got to that place, I was isolated. But I would say that was the most rigid time of my life, not being able to handle it.
So you softened, I think, as you said, oh, I could see my own rigidity. And then you accept yourself and
Right,
that limitation, but you outgrew it. So,
right.
so then our ability to see our own rigidity and not reject it or judge it too harshly, then I'm able to see, oh, okay, they're rigid. They're probably it's limiting them, but
Right.
instead of judging them, I could be more compassionate towards them.
It's tough to get to that place though, you know?
Yeah, very tough
Yeah,
because
yeah.
their rigidity could be triggering to me, especially if their rigidity involves judging or rejecting me. So,
Yeah, I get one more comment and I'll be respectful because I know you probably have to go for another call.
yeah.
Is just when people are going through a tough time, before I might have said that person's a jerk. Now I go to the place of what's going on, what happened, what have they not resolved, what have they not come to grips with, where haven't they forgiven somebody or themselves, what's happening here. I always assume there's something that's unresolved there that they're working through, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I assume that that attitude is more pleasant for you. And not
Much.
only is it better for them, they feel your kindness and whatever. So if we go in with that harsh judgment with a jerk, then it triggers more jerkness. And
Yes,
but if
yes.
we go in like, okay, well, I'm curious, why is this person acting this way? What's behind it? And then this curiosity, this softness, it's pleasant, more pleasant to us, and then maybe they soften. More likely they will soften, and then we can both have a better experience.
100%. And it takes getting used to it takes accepting yourself first. If you can I've learned that. Once I got to a place where hey, I'm good with me. I'm good with the flawed version of me. Then I can be more accepting and less judgmental of other people. I'm going to give you the last word. If somebody wants to talk to you, explore an idea with you, or just meet you, what's the best way for them to do it?
Well, they can go to my website, yossiamram.net. And if you can't remember how to spell that, go to Awakening SI, SI being short for spiritual intelligence, awakeningsi.org. And from there, you can get to me, send an email and what have you. Yeah, from there, you can link to all my different resources and stuff about my book, free assessment of your spiritual intelligence profile. So you could see which of these qualities you're strong on, which are more opportunities. There's free assessment tools, there's tips for development and free events that I host for cultivating a particular quality each month. Our next event, I don't know when this will be published, but it's going to be on freedom and liberation. So in July, in honor of 4th of July. So
Oh, cool.
last one was on integrity and, inner wholeness. So each month I take one of these 22 qualities and I host a free event. with practices and connecting with other people and community. Anyway, so yeah,
So
yes,
I want,
amram.net or awakeningsi.org.
well, listen, I enjoyed the conversation and I'll do some, touch-ups and all that stuff and I'll have it released within, say, the next week or so.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Dave, been delightful. It really is delightful. It's good to find a kindred spirit.
I agree. Thanks. We'll do this again.
I hope so. I
All
hope
right.
so.
Enjoy your
Yeah.
fourth.
Okay, you too.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.